Hey, welcome you guys. Today we're going to make a red velvet cake slice for Valentine's Day. So the first thing you'll need for this is some foam clay. You'll want a pretty good sized chunk of clay because we're going to make 3 layers of cake for this. So depending on the size that you want to make and how thick you want your cake layers to be, just grab a piece that you think will be enough. So condition your clay, and then we're gonna roll this out. So I'm gonna use these ribbon spools to get my thickness the same. So I'm gonna put one on each side, and then as I roll out, once my rolling pin touches both of the spools, then I'll know that I have the same thickness throughout. So I'm going to use my clay blade to cut my clay, and then I'm going to use a ruler to make sure that I get the same size for each layer. I'm just going to cut a rough triangle first, and then I'll trim it down using my ruler. I want this to fit my tiered tray, so I'm making my slice small. If you want a bigger slice, like a realistic size slice, then make yours bigger than I am. So what I have here is 4 3/4 long and 2 3/4 wide. So I'm going to cut 2 more pieces that are that same size. Okay, so don't worry if your sizes aren't exactly the same. Once these dry, we can trim them up and make sure that they all fit together perfectly. But just make sure they're kind of the similar size. And so you're going to want to let these dry overnight, and that'll just make it easier for us to get the cake texture on the cakes. Okay, so I've let my cake layers dry overnight, so this part feels dry to the touch. So I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to start making some texture on the sides of this. And I'm just going to kind of pick in there and pull out. So it's going to make this like crumbly texture. And we're going to need to do this on both long sides of the triangles, on all of them. Okay, so here's what it looks like. So you can see I have pieces that are kind of sticking out. Those will just look like the crumbly pieces of cake. And if you don't want those there, you can just knock them right off. As you can see, I have a big pile of pieces that flew out. So if that happens, if you have pieces flying out, then you're doing it right. If you do it while the clay is wet, it won't do this, and you won't get as crumbly of a texture. But you could still do it if the clay is wet if you wanted to. Just wouldn't be as drastic. So now we're going to mix up our red velvet cake color. So I'm going to start with this True Red by Anita's. You can use any kind of blue red that you have. And then to that, I'm going to add some melted chocolate. If you don't have melted chocolate, you could also add burnt umber or chocolate bar. Any kind of brown color should work. The amount just might vary. And you'll have to play around with this until you get kind of the color that you want. I mean, when you look at red velvet cake, it can be kind of different colors. So, you know, some of them have more brown in them and some of them are more red. So you just have to see what you like. I think I'm pretty happy with this color. So now what we need to do is just paint. We only need to paint these sides that we textured because the rest of it's going to be covered in frosting. So do the sides and then maybe like up onto the edge just a little bit more so that if any of that shows, you won't have white sticking out. And make sure you really get down into those spots where you textured. Now you'll want to let these dry for a little bit. You don't want to have your paint be wet when you're trying to frost the cake because then the paint will get into the spackling and you'll have a big mess. Your frosting will turn pink. So let those dry. Okay, so I got my paint dried up and now we need to make the frosting. So the frosting on this is normally just pure white. Sometimes it's kind of an off-white, so I'm going to do mine just white. But if you want to do like an off-white, just add some antique white to your spackling. So we're going to use lightweight spackling. So this will be our frosting. Mine, you can see here, is pure white, and it's also like the right consistency, like a whipped cream. Some of them are drier, especially if you buy the one at Dollar Tree. It is usually like a gray color and it's very dry. So if you're using something like that, you need to add a little bit of water at a time. Like just use some dropper or like a measuring teaspoon. I usually do like a 1/4 teaspoon at a time and just add a little bit of water at a time and mix it up. And then you'll also need to add some white paint if it's gray, if your spackling is gray. So I have my piping bag here and I'm going to use a piping bag with just the end cut off to put the frosting in between the layers because it'll just make it easier to apply that way. If you don't have piping bags and you don't want to use a piping bag, you can just put it on with like a spatula or something, a plastic knife. But I just find this is easier to be able to get it on there without making a mess in the cake part. So I'm going to go ahead and load up my bag. So to do that, I just roll my bag down. And then I make a cup with my hand. And then I use a plastic spoon to take it out and I just put it right into my bag there. And then I'm just going to roll the bag up. And then I'm going to push from the top and just push all the spackling down as far as I can get it to go. And then I'm going to cut off the tip. I don't want to cut off like a huge amount because it'll make a big hole, but I don't want it super small either. So I'm going to cut about right there. Okay, and then I'll just push this the rest of the way down. So I'm going to take one of my pieces of cake and I'm just going to put some frosting onto it. So you're going to want not too much. And then I'm going to take, this is just a little spatula that came with one of my paintbrush sets. So I'm just going to take that and kind of press it down toward the end because it's hard to get that very end part. And I'm just going to kind of smooth the whole thing out so that it's even. And then I'm going to put one of my layers on top and kind of smush it down. I don't want the frosting to come flying out the side, like smushing out, but I want to get that nice even layer. And then you can take a spatula and just kind of smooth out anything you need to. And you can see there's a little gap there. We'll fix that once we get all the layers together. So we're going to do the same thing and add the top layer. And don't worry if you get spackle on any of your cake, you can always just touch that up with your paint afterwards. So don't worry about it. You can see it's kind of smushing out here, so I'm going to take a little bit of that off. And then any of the extra, you can just fill in these end pieces. Okay, so now we need to frost this back side and the top. So I'm going to put some frosting on here, maybe, and then just spread it around just like you would frosting on a real cake. And then we need to do this back side as well with the frosting. So I'm using a 2D piping tip, and I'm just going to put that into my bag. And then I'm going to mark just below where the openings are so that I can cut it right there. And then the piping tip will just go right through, and then I can just fill it like I did the other one. Now before I do this part, I'm going to actually put some sprinkles on. So I have some little beads that I got on Amazon, and they don't have holes in them. So I'm going to use some of those as my sprinkles. And then I also have some little heart-shaped clay slices. Oops. And so I'm going to sprinkle some of those on too. And then I'm just going to take my piping tip and just make kind of a fancy little border here at the edge. And then I'm going to put one dollop right in the center here. And then I have this little pick that I got from Dollar Tree. I'm just going to take the heart off the stick, and I'm going to stick that right in there, since this is for Valentine's Day. And then the only thing you need to do is, if on the sides you have spots where you got spackle on your paint, which you probably will, I have quite a few, then you just need to touch up that paint. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Can't wait to see your Valentine cakes, and I'll see you in the next video.